Hello, everyone. This is Tracy McMullen with Interrel Consulting. I'm excited to be meeting with you guys today. I think Edward has been doing some webcasts as part of this coronavirus, but we kind of paused and posted a ton of briefings, recorded content all around, dealing with and attacking the environment that we're in today with coronavirus. So this is, I feel like, at least for me, kind of the first time I'm getting back into our weekly webcast schedule. So excited to be with you guys. I'm going to share my screen here. Let me just make sure that you guys can see my screen and we'll get started. All right, so I think hopefully you guys are able to see my screen. If I could just get a quick kind of just response on the Q&A section. Can you guys see my screen and can you hear me okay? Yes and yes. Okay, perfect. All right, with that, we're going to get started. So again, welcome everybody. Today we're talking about scenario planning. Which is what I have been eating, sleeping, breathing for, gosh, has it already been 2 months, the last 2 months? Because we're all of March, it felt like, and all of April. I cannot believe that it has been this long. So really trying to get everything out of my head today that I've been working with clients so that you guys have some tools, have some approaches that you can apply in your environment related to scenario planning. Again, my name is Tracy McMullen with Interrel Consulting. I've been working with these tools a really long time and excited to be speaking with you today. I did want to make sure you know that this is, let me just make sure my slide advances, the first webcast in a series of webcasts really targeted to help you in topics that are applicable right now and things that you guys should be doing right now with your EPM solutions. So again, today we're going to talk about scenario planning and how you can use existing tools that you have, or maybe it's a new tool, making sure you're aware of all of the different options that are available to support you from a scenario planning perspective. Next week, we're going to be talking about some of the reporting tips and tricks. So you guys are going to have a lot of variance analysis, variance reporting, narrative reporting. We need to be doing a lot of analysis and ad hoc, finding data. So what we want to do is share some tips and tricks to help you guys be more efficient. Following that, we're going to be talking about strategic modeling, which is another tool you guys, especially if you have the EPM Cloud, PBCS, EBPCS, or Hyperion Strategic Finance, or if those are tools that you guys have in-house but haven't used yet, now is the time. And so I want to kind of give you some tools to get started in using those technologies. Profitability is another very important area. A lot of times, folks don't truly understand where their profitability lies in their different segments or their different customers, products that they make, where you take and you allocate out your full enterprise system of cost to get true profitability. What is important, this used to be a nice to have, now it's critical that we know where are our most profitable areas of our business, because that is where we need to be focusing right now. And if there's something that is really negatively impacting our profitability, we need to, address that because now everything is just so important. So middle of May, we're going to be talking about profitability, and then that kind of dovetails into different cost management strategies as well. We'll talk about cash flow again, and we'll see a little bit of cash flow today, but just the different alternatives and how you can really build an automated cash flow with these technologies. You'll see it in a couple of my demos, but we'll spend some time showing you some pre-built features that Oracle has for us to do automated cash flow updates. So being able to see our liquidity, understanding cash flow as our forecasts are dramatically changed and our plans are changing with all of the coronavirus scenarios. So we'll be talking about that, and then we'll jump back into reporting. So again, we're kind of giving you some quick tips and tricks next week, and then we're going to go back and kind of recap all of the overall solutions and really jump into how you can be using this today, and then jumping into data visualization. So a whole series of different tools to put in your tool belt which kind of were nice to haves, and now they're must-haves in this crazy world that we are in. Now, what I would encourage you guys to do is, again, we've got these Webcast series out over the next month, but we do have briefings, which is, if you have been to the website, we have NRL Financial News website. We've got a whole series of recorded videos on most of these topics. So they're shorter kind of blips of information, but I encourage you guys to go to the NRL website if you want to get more information now and you don't want to have to wait until the middle of May. And if it's something that you critically need now and you really want to learn more about this profitability, because again, that's a very important area. How do we really see kind of our true profitable customers, products, areas, segments? Please reach out to me to info@nrl.com, because we can help you immediately. You don't have to wait that long for a Webcast series. So if you need something urgently, immediately, we've got tools. We're working on packaged offerings to really make this easy for you guys. So don't hesitate. Don't feel like you have to wait to reach out. So with that, kind of in relation to this, we've created some offerings, and we're continuing to add this in, because what we're seeing is you guys you don't need a 6-month project right now. You need a 5-day project, a 10-day project, and maybe 30 days, to get a solution up and running. What should you be doing? How can you take your current applications and make them agile to answer the questions that you guys have? So again, if you guys are needing help, if you're struggling, and again, if we have offerings from like, a 5-hour call that I think we actually are offering for free right now. Hopefully I don't get into trouble for saying that. But actually having just a call with one of our, leading consultants and architects, just to help doing an assessment and provide you some recommendations. So we can do that. And again, we've got several different layers. Please see this here at the link. And again, if you guys have any questions, just let me know. So with that said, what is the coronavirus recession going to look like? And I think, we all don't know. I think it has been a crazy 2 months, and I think a recession, at the beginning we were like, is there going to be a recession? I think now we know there is going to be a recession, but what is that going to look like? And everybody's speculating, and you get all different kinds of opinions. Now, as we start to go back to work, what is that going to look like, and what does that mean? And again, we still don't know. We're really in a whole bunch of uncharted territories, and so it's important to identify what's in our control and what is out of our control. There's a whole bunch of stuff out of our control right now. How long is this going to last? Again, when we first put together this presentation, it was the beginning of March, and I cannot believe is it May 1st? It's May 1st. We're already May 1st, and we're talking about this. How long is this going to last? So clearly it went through April into May, and I think, hopefully we're seeing maybe the beginnings. I'm the optimist. I'm ready to be back to normal. So I'm saying, yes, summer, we're going to be back to normal. I know we're not going to totally be back, but I'm really hoping that we get some medications and things that help us really tackle this virus, so that we can get back to I want to go back to the old normal, not the new normal that everybody's talking about. Is it going to last longer, right? So again, we don't know how long it's going to last. How expensive is it going to be? Consumer spending and changing behaviors. I mean, I'm already seeing this in my family. You guys are probably seeing that as well. Unemployment rates are just crazy high. Thankfully, we've got different government packages that are hopefully helping out different businesses from an employment standpoint, but absolutely that's impacting access to credit. I am hearing all kinds of awesome stories from different banks working with customers and helping out from a credit perspective. So hopefully that continues, but it's still, a lot of concerns, a lot of worry, a lot of things that we're going to need to plan for. What is the government doing? Again, we've seen they've taken some action, taken some steps to help us from a business perspective, but is it going to be enough? And it's kind of hard to know once it depends on how long this virus is going to last. So a lot of unknown. So what are the different scenarios you should be planning for? And again, there's a lot of buzzwords out there: V-shaped curve, U-shaped curve, best case, worst case, recession, delayed recovery. So there's a lot of different terms out there. and again, we've kind of posted some links. We've done this through some of our briefings. So some of the different organizations out there are posting scenarios and some details behind this. So these are just good resources for you guys to have. Bain & Company had originally presented 3 different scenarios you guys should plan for. McKinsey started at 3, and then they've now gone to 2, which I think is applicable. Delayed recovery, prolonged contraction. Morgan Stanley had some scenarios. So just resources that's some good helpful reading to help you understand what are some of the assumptions that you need to be building into these scenarios. There's also some, and this one was like super complicated, Bookings EDU kind of had some sovereign macroeconomic scenarios. So a lot of different scenarios out there. Again, when we presented this in March, at the very beginning of March, we presented this, we talked about 3 different scenarios. I think really we're now with the 2 scenarios and talking about delayed recovery. I think hopefully this is the stage we're in now, where we're going to see the new case counts slowing by summer. We still are going to have some quarantines and some travel restrictions. You know, testing capacity we're seeing is increasing, so that's good. But consumer business spending still dropping. We're still, you know, kind of in this recession. Unemployment levels are still at higher levels, and we're feeling some pressure from bankruptcies and financial systems because we've had 2, 3, 4 months of really trying times. Hopefully with the delayed recovery, we're back to kind of normal at the end of 2020. So kind of in this macro scenario, what you guys would plan for is a 2-quarter decrease, 2 quarters to get back to normal. You're going to have a pretty significant impact to your P&L, and, you know, a lot of uncontrollable items where the government has, you know, locked us down. We've had stay-at-home orders. We may not be able to open up our businesses. We've had to close our factories. We may have supply chain issues. So there's some, you know, operational issues and disruptions that we're having. So from a mitigation standpoint, trying to do a lot of aggressive strategy planning to help mitigate our loss of revenue. We may be temporarily suspending different operations. We may be doing a furlough program for our employees, definitely looking to conserve cash. And with that said, and definitely thinking defensively and making it through this time, but with an eye to thinking offensively and how could you possibly gain market share, you know, in this environment. I have talked to or seen a few customers, you know, that through this, they actually were very, you know, cash heavy and are taking this opportunity to try and gain market share. And so really attacking and going after customers, offering, you know, solutions to them, you know, for little or no cost just to gain the market share, even though they may not make the money now, but to gain that bank. And so it's definitely a time. Yes, we have to think defensively, but it is also a time and maybe an opportunity for you to think offensively. Prolonged contraction, so this is where we're going to last a little bit longer. I'm really hoping we are not in this scenario, but where the new cases continue throughout the end of the year. This isn't just kind of a seasonal virus or we don't find medications, right? So this is a little bit longer. We have our 2-quarter decrease, 2 quarters at a pretty low, you know, pretty low level, and then we have 4 quarters to rise to get back. So a little bit longer. This is, you know, more of your flatter U-shape scenario. This is, in this case, you may be actually stopping and closing down specific operations. This is why it's important to understand which of your operations are the most profitable so that you can focus on those. Reducing size, conserving cash. So again, those are kind of the 2 big scenarios, macro level scenarios that we're recommending. What should be involved in that scenario planning? So again, there's kind of 5 measures that you want to be looking at. And you guys are likely already doing this today, right? So your units, your volumes for your particular business, and then the sales and revenue correlation. We need to be looking at our costs. What costs are variable and identifying those. So then that way we can model our different volumes up and down and have those variable costs adjust. Fixed costs with an eye to those and what can be reduced. Compensation expense, of course, is an important one because labor is a lot of times our most expensive line item. Supply chain is going to be another important aspect that you model for, especially if you anticipate or think you could have supply chain issues. Of course, ultimately getting to cash and liquidity and making sure that you're solvent, you know, and then your CapEx planning and forecast and working capital, again, to help you through this, this trying time. Okay, so those are the different areas and measures, and what's important and great about the solutions and technologies we're going to discuss today is that ideally you've got this connected where, like, if you update drivers, you update assumptions related to units, related to some of your fixed costs, you see that flow through to your cash flow statement and your balance sheet. How long should we be planning out? How far should the models go out? So near term, totally important, absolutely important. Long term is still important too, because we don't know how long this is going to last, and you're going to want to plan for the effects of it. The main thing I wanted to share with you guys is you want to focus on timeliness and what you can do fast, and not so much precision. Okay, so again, it's going to be different for each organization, you know, and what makes sense for your company. So, you know, definitely we're going through 2020, 2021. That's going to be an important time frame to look at. Definitely looking at the immediate quarters and what actions, what things you can be doing to address right now, so that you make sure you make it to the end of 2020. Potentially looking long-term out. So that's where some of the strategic modeling, we're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks, can be helpful. So again, we can do that kind of long-range planning here in the tools I'm going to talk about today, but there's also kind of that aggregate macro level planning that's also possible in strategic modeling. So from a timing standpoint, it's going to depend, but really what you can do at an accurate level. And if you are forecasting out your 3 to 5 years, at that point, you're probably doing that either at a quarterly level or at an annual level, and not at a monthly level. You're going to want to create scenarios and versions. And what's powerful about the tools, if you guys have used a Hyperion Planning and SBase, we've built this into our applications for years and years. So it's a term that we're familiar with. So what we'd recommend, and there's no exact right answer, you guys do what makes sense for you, but my recommendation kind of from a design-wise is you actually create scenarios that go along with kind of the macro level. So delayed recovery, that scenario that kind of has those macro assumptions about what's happening with the virus. And then you plan your business accordingly, thinking, okay, hopefully our corona cases are going to slow, you know, by the end of May, and really we're on our path to get back. How do we do that? Where prolonged contraction means maybe we have a recurrence with the, you know, we open up our businesses in our states, but then all of a sudden, you know, it starts spreading again. What happens there? So kind of base your macro scenarios based on, you know, kind of some of these unknowns of what could happen with the virus, what could happen with the external factors. So then based on that, what you would want to do is then create your different versions of what is your game plan of attack to plan for that particular scenario. So in my delayed recovery, I may assume I'm going to do, you know, put 10% of my employees on a furlough program. I'm going to assume, you know, this % drop in revenue. Again, those kind of different measures that we talked about. What do you think could happen? And then viewing the financial results. And then you can kind of see the results of that. Does that make sense? You can tweak it, update it, but then that's kind of, okay, if we, you know, do these things, here's what our forecasts look like. Or if we do this, you want to, like, okay, let's assume we actually increase the number of furloughs or layoffs. If we have a different, you know, assumption kind of on our revenue and our volumes, allowing you to kind of look at those things side by side to figure out what's the right game plan to help you get through the scenario. So if we do have a delayed recovery, you know, these are our different options. Okay, these are probably the best, you know, action items we need to take to help our financial solvency. And then you repeat and go through that same process for a prolonged contraction. So using scenarios to track kind of the macro level scenarios, and then using versions to kind of track your different, what if we do this or this or this? What does that look like? What's the financial impact of that? And again, my last recommendation, and then we're going to jump into the tools themselves, is focusing on timeliness over precision. So a lot of times, and I don't want you guys to get lost, and you got to, you know, get your users to buy into this, your management to buy into this. Right now, you've got to be fast. So it is not going to be as accurate. You've got to be fast so you can kind of make some assumptions. It's not going to be down to super granular detail. You can make some global assumptions and calculate it at a super granular detail, but you need to make kind of some higher level assumptions to come up with these plans. Okay, kind of the other, and Edward likes to communicate this slide. which I think is really good. Dwight D. Eisenhower said, I've always found that plans themselves are useless, but the planning process is indispensable. So again, the ultimate goal is, again, for you guys to figure out, okay, what these 5 actions are going to help us through this process. And so it's kind of going through the exercise, going through the thinking. And again, you got to have the visibility into the numbers, the calculation results, but ultimately you're trying to get to an action plan to help you through this process. So what are the tools to help you scenario plan? So the first tool we're going to talk about is using Planning Cloud and Hyperion Planning. And so again, all the demos that I have built in here are showing you Planning Cloud. But if you are an on-premise Hyperion Planning customer, this totally applies to you. Now, you may not be able to create some of the cool dashboard. There's some dashboarding features, but some of it, the kind of the end user feel may look a little bit different, but the core functionality is there in Hyperion Planning to help you plan. So, I mean, while upgrading to the cloud is great, you don't have to, because again, I want you to be fast. And honestly, I'd love it if you could leave this call, you know, with some action items to take in your existing application that you have right now, and can build some quick scenario planning options within your current solution. So no, we're seeing Planning Cloud, but you can do a lot of this in Hyperion Planning as well. So what you want to be able to do is really have easy version comparison and easy ways to do what if. Okay, so here's an example, and we're going to see some recorded examples. I think what's great about Planning Cloud is building in these editable dashboards and visualizations, so you can really see the kind of the impacts and the changes as you make those assumptions. But what you're going to do is figure out what are our 2 to 5 scenarios that are most likely. So again, I think kind of looking at delayed recovery, prolonged contraction from a scenario perspective, and then planning the versions. What are the top KPIs? Okay, so you're not going to want to plan every single, you know, GL account that you have. That's not what we're doing. It's kind of what are the key drivers of your business, key drivers of expense, and that's what you want to look at. That's what you want to focus on. And in a previous webcast, we did a virtual conference about a month ago. Somebody asked, well, how many? You know, and I think, you know, it's going to be different for each one of you, but like if you start getting into the 20 different, you know, drivers and assumptions, I think at that point, every little bit that you add in, every bit of complexity you add in, that impacts the timeliness that you're able to respond. So keep it as simple as you can. I mean, you still want it to be, you know, somewhat meaningful and accurate, but keep it as simple as you can. And use those KPIs, those drivers to help drive the financial forecast. Again, you can use Planning Cloud or Hyperion Planning. And there's built-in capabilities and features to be able to do this. Again, under the covers is Space, which is, you know, in my opinion, like the best multi-dimensional database solution, provides so many features and functions and benefits. So that's what we're going to be using here in some of these examples. So here's kind of just a generic, and what I'm going to do first is kind of show you some examples of what's possible. And then I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for you guys to take and implement behind the scenes. So here's an example of a dashboard. I think this one actually is using the financials framework that comes with Planning Cloud. You don't have to use the financials framework, again, your current application, but what you can do is set up your set of dashboards so you can quickly monitor data. What I want to draw your attention to is, again, let's say current month data is loaded in, right? And it doesn't look good, of course. So again, I created this original demo back, you know, in March. And so here's where, or excuse me, cut out like early April. So our March data numbers are in, and so you can see forecast has been updated, and you see this drop, significant blue drop in revenue, right? So our plan is the green that's going through, and then we've got forecast has been updated with our updated actuals, and then there's a significant drop. So data doesn't look good, right? And so we can drill in and we can see, all right, we actually got negative income, right? We didn't adjust, we didn't plan for our revenue, we had to close down stores, we had to close down, or, you know, our revenue stream essentially stopped or significantly dropped. So we had a negative impact. So, you know, and again, these dashboards can be interactive. So, and again, you can kind of zoom in to P&L statements within the cloud so you can have that visibility. So we've updated our forecast. So again, kind of negative income from an actual standpoint, so kind of impacts our overall forecast. If we look from a cash perspective, the impact on cash was small. Still overall, it's okay, but that's because we haven't updated our forecast yet based on our new normal, the new factors that we know. So again, when you're ready to start scenario planning, there's a couple of different options. So again, here, if you're kind of planning this for your enterprise or organization and you want to distribute out a consistent set of scenarios and versions that you want folks to plan to, you're essentially just going to create the new scenarios, you create the new versions. So you can see I'm creating like a new mitigation version or scenario. So it's just a matter of adding those in and then refreshing, and then those scenarios are going to be available for users to plan at. This is in the case where we really want to kind of control and have everybody planning to a standard set of versions, which makes a whole lot of sense, and you guys will absolutely want to do this. Whenever you create your scenario, make sure you include beginning balance as a time period so that you can plan your assumptions at those annual levels. Okay. All right. So then the next example I just wanted to show you, because this came up from a customer recently. Let's see if the demo will start. So there's a demo built in here, and I'm not sure quite why it's not playing. But what I want to do, or what I wanted to communicate, was that if you have the need, if users want to be able to create their own scenarios and you want to give that power to users, might be likely a set of power users or groups that don't have to wait for the administrator to do that, it is possible. So you can, there are some settings that you can set to enable users to create their own scenarios. So again, my demo's not working and my technology. We may try and come back to that. So if anybody wants to see that at the end, I'll try and kind of restart my PowerPoint presentation and see if this demo can work. But mainly takeaway, again, is that either as an administrator, kind of core Hyperion user, you can create a standard set of scenarios and versions for you folks to use, which I recommend. But you also have the ability, if you wanted folks to be able, for them to create kind of their own sandbox versions with their data sets, you have the ability to do that as well. And I'll try and see if I can show you guys that at the end if we've got some time. So at that point, once you have your scenarios created, you're going to be copying, your forecast or plan into that new target scenario. And then what you want to do is apply some global assumptions based on those drivers. Because again, if we're doing this for using your current applications, again, you could create new cubes, you could create high level things, but this is just kind of a quick way to take your existing application and kind of mass update. So you have some global assumptions that could be applied across your departments, across your entities, et cetera. You then are ready to review and analyze, and then add in your additional adjustments. So here's an example. Okay, this demo is working, so that's good. Where again, I've just set up a rule that allows me to copy, my forecast. So I'm going to copy from forecast working, and I kind of set that as my source into my delayed recovery working version. So again, I can copy that into one of my mitigation versions if I wanted to. Now I've set up a form here, I've set up a business rule here to apply some global assumptions kind of by quarter. So I'm saying I want to do a % reduction on volumes for each quarter. So I'm going to reduce it by 50%. I'm also going to do some adjustments from a salary standpoint. So we're going to do a 10% reduction on current compensation rates for existing employees. So I'm going to apply this. And again, you could run this for your entire application. You could set it up if you needed to run it by entity, run it by department. You can choose kind of the level that you want to apply these global assumptions. But in this case, I just set up a rule to capture inputs to the users. So what happens is behind the scenes, copies over the version, the forecast working version, and then it applies those assumptions and recalculates my data. So now I can see my new delayed recovery scenario, and notice that's kind of more of my, V-ish, although it looks like a U, U-ish scenario. Again, if we were looking at a quarterly perspective, it'd be a little more V-ish scenario. So same thing if we run it's interesting, all right. So if we wanted for the prolonged contraction scenario, again, creating just a simple rule to copy data across. And then here you can select, we're going to be pushing data to prolonged excuse me, scenario to the working version. I click OK. And then we can, again, apply our assumptions here. So volumes for Q2 and Q3, we assume a 50% reduction for Q4 and Q1, 30% reduction. And then again, we can say, you know what, we're going to continue these salary reductions maybe through the end of the year to help mitigate and fight off the reduction in volumes that we're going to have. So again, you have the ability to kind of, how I've set this up and what this rule looks like, what these drivers look like, depends on you. So we can adjust labor rates, we can adjust headcount. In this example, material expenses or supplies. And then if you wanted to just, for overall expenses, just kind of do a global percent reduction, you can do that as well. And lots of different options related to that. So we go ahead and make these adjustments here. So we're going to do a 15% on any other expenses. We click run, and then our prolonged contraction scenarios now calculated and added in. Okay. So once that's been added in and you've kind of done that process, you can use your existing forms and functions. So I can go in and now, and again, most of the Hyperion Planning or Planning Cloud applications are set up with a point of view. If you've got hopefully you've got kind of a good design where scenario and version are in your point of view. So then you can use your existing forms and users can select. So here I'm focused on the delayed recovery. And again, notice that in this example, this is financials. I've actually cleared out my trends and I've populated the calculated version based on those global assumptions. But then if I want to layer in further adjustments from there, you can do that as well. And you do want to give users that ability. So you kind of have this kind of global, this is what we're going to assume, what we're going to try and tackle. Here's what it means from an impact standpoint. But then users have the ability then to still go in and apply further adjustments for their specific entity, department, whatever it is they may be planning. If you're using driver-based planning, you can update drivers and then those drivers are updated and we'll calculate. So here, this is the financials framework where it calculates your revenue and your cost of goods sold based on drivers. We can layer in adjustments on top of that. From an expense standpoint, again, this is going to be calculated based on our global assumptions. So we can kind of navigate to our expense dashboard and see what's happening here. And then we can address any driver-based expense planning and or trend-based planning. So here, if I jump to no product, we've got several different expense components that are calculated based on some drivers. We can adjust those drivers. So if we adjust our head count, then that will flow through to the remainder of the forecast. So hopefully that makes sense. Check on time because I got a lot of stuff I want to show you guys. The other piece that I mentioned is, again, we want to have this all tied into your cash flow statement, your balance sheet. So in this example, we updated those forecasts based on those assumptions, and we've got our delayed recovery and prolonged contraction. And what we can see is, okay, now we've got a problem. We've got several cases where we go negative from a cash perspective. So what do we need to do there? Again, if you're using, you may not have implemented this in your application, but know that Planning Cloud has cash flow tied in. So you could build this functionality. Again, you could use Planning Cloud to do this. Where we can update our cash flow timing assumptions. So this is using the direct method. So we can say, usually we get our revenue 30 days out. We know our revenue income, the money that's coming, the cash that's coming in is going to be much slower. So we can spread that out and then we can assume we're going to get 25% of our revenue the first month, 25% the next month, 25% the next month, 25%. So we've kind of updated the the assumptions that we think about the cash flow coming in. Now we can also make update assumptions about the cash going out. So we're going to work with our supply chain, our vendors, and say, yeah, we're going to go to 60-day terms, and we're going to pay maybe 50% of our vendors in the second month, the rest of the vendors in the third month. So we can clear out, so you can update these cash flow timings. And then what it will do is take, okay, here's our updated revenue forecast, our expense forecast that we have based on all of our different assumptions, our game plan, what we're going to try. Okay, and then we can see, what does that mean from a cash flow perspective? So we update the timings, the cash flow calculation runs and updates, and here, let's see, all right, so let me jump to my next. So then we can review the updated cash flow. And so we can see, again, in that particular change, we fixed, and so now we've addressed some of our cash flow issues, but we still have some places where we need to look. So June is still negative cash flow. So if we can see the detail, right? So our sources of cash, our uses of cash, but then we can also see, okay, we've got some planned activity related to financing activities. And again, we were going to be planning some repayments of our borrowings. That clearly goes out the door. You know, we're not going to do that. We may also want to, we're not going to buy back any stock any longer in this time period. So again, we can update those cash forecasts based on our finance activities, and then we can see the impact of the overall cash flow impact. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, we'll have a webcast that spends a little bit more time going through kind of how you can set up cash flow from an indirect method standpoint using the balance sheet and driver-based assumptions related to the balance sheet, or we can use the direct method. So again, that's that webcast that's coming up in just a bit. So hopefully that makes sense and kind of an example of something that you can build in your system. Here's just another example, and I won't spend quite as much time, but notice again here in this scenario, so this is a healthcare provider, Interrail's in the healthcare business, and where this is a hospital system. And so notice I can set up, even in the planning cloud, cards and clusters specifically for the scenario planning process, and it's very quick and easy to do. So I can navigate my entity structure, and I can view my different plans based on this. So what we can see from a hospital system, it's really interesting, because I think a lot of us would assume, oh, our hospitals are going to be doing great through this process, where actually that's not necessarily the case, kind of depending on the department. So the emergency rooms definitely are seeing a higher level of volumes, but like if we're at the head and neck center, a lot of our patients are staying home. If it's not mission critical, we actually are seeing a dip in our visits and our revenue. So as a hospital system, you know, you need to be planning the ups and the demands that are happening in some of our high areas, like our emergency rooms, but in some of our other kind of non-critical, non-urgent centers, we're likely seeing lots of different drops. So you want to set up your dashboards, you want to set up your analysis and your reports where you can look at your key trends. So at the head and neck center, one of its key drivers is the visits that it's seeing. Emergency center, same thing. Now we see a different view. Notice how the graph switches. For emergency center, we're seeing kind of an up and down there. We can also, what's important here too, is then by these different departments looking at labor capacity and labor usage, because we may be wanting to redirect resources to focus where we need to. Again, so here's an example from like an ICU center. We may expect those to go up compared to normal. So in the previous example, I showed you an example of a rule that we prompted the user to put in some assumptions. We could also set up forms to capture those global assumptions. So here, these are kind of, again, in my demos, I just did like % adjustments, but you could set up the logic however you wanted to adjust those drivers. So here we can plan for ICU admissions. Those are going to go up by 30%. Emergency is going to go up, but we can see from a reduction standpoint, head and neck center, those may be going down. So we can enter in those assumptions, and then we can run a rule that then will copy from, you know, our current forecast, wherever we want our target, into one of our scenarios, so prolonged retraction, and it's going to calculate based on these global assumptions that have been input. So you can do it via a runtime prompt, you can do it via a form, and then again, it's going to update your overall forecasts. So hopefully that makes sense. Here, again, once we've updated, it's interesting. All right, So now if we jump into, once we've kind of copied over that scenario, this is an example where, again, we can use existing forms and functions. Those have those global assumptions applied. Users can go in and tweak, just like I did in that other scenario. So again, if I look here, I'm looking at the emergency center. I can switch to head and neck center. And then again, that's got some calculated results based on the assumptions that we input. If we want to layer in additional adjustments based on that, we can. And you can see kind of, hopefully you're noticing the graphs changing below based on the different options. I can zoom in, so from a year total standpoint, I can zoom in to a quarterly level, to a monthly level, and then make further adjustments. If we want to declare out adjustments, we could do that too. So again, you have all your planning features and functions that you have the ability to make changes. Our surgical cases, oh, sorry, no, this is your visits. We're making some adjustments from a visit perspective. Okay. I did also want to point out for anybody who's new to APM Cloud that, again, if you don't really want to work in the web, which is what I've been primarily showing, again, if you're in on-premise, this absolutely is your world. So you can plan and navigate and do these things in Excel. So here, if I wanted to just do some direct adjustments in, what you want to do with these forecasts is have users the ability to just kind of key in those adjustments, key in those plans and assumptions. And then they can do that. Notice we've got all our same kind of cool spreading functionality that's available. Users can submit their data. And then we can see the updated information. Here, the other example, and I think here, what you may want to be doing too is we see offsetting expenses. So let's see if I've got, well, so there's also just another example, and for some reason it's not playing, but you have the ability to, you know, if you need to, from a demand standpoint, labor expense standpoint, especially in this hospital scenario, we want to redirect resources, right? So our ER is probably slammed, so can we take some of the resources that we have from the head and neck center, redeploy them to use in our high operating areas? And then you can update your plans across departments to be able to plan for that. The other thing, and hopefully again, this is kind of just built in for folks who are new to EPM, but just being able to do kind of the ad hoc analysis as well. So we can take any form and I can jump into ad hoc analysis mode. I can do my zoom only, keep only. I can, you know, kind of click and drag different departments. So I can zoom out to a year total perspective. I'm planning my different scenarios. I can zoom out on a department, zoom in to see all of the different departments and comparing these different scenarios side by side. We can then apply nicely formatted reporting if we wanted to, but again, just one of the key features, you want to have users have the ability to kind of slice and dice and be able to quickly drill in and see information. So that's another key feature, key benefit of the solution and using it for your scenario planning process. Okay. So from a timing standpoint, I want to make sure I have time to go through all of the tips and tricks. So I have another demo built in, but I'm actually going to kind of skip through this. We do have, I think Edward shows this example in one of the briefings that are on the NRO website, so definitely check that out. Again, kind of our energy customers, I'm in Houston, so we are seeing the impact of this greatly. We not only have coronavirus that's slowing down our economy, we also have Russia and Saudi Arabia and all the OPEC craziness, you know, with the refusing to reduce production output, which I think they, since this slide, they have reduced some, you know, pricing, but anyway, it's still somewhat of a big mess. So again, similar scenario where users can adjust pricing and versions and from a oil industry perspective. So really this is applicable to all of you guys. So if you guys have been to any one of my webcasts, I like the tips and tricks and kind of the technical how-to. So if you are more of a, you know, kind of user standpoint, some of this may not make sense. So it's okay, tune me out for like 5 or 10 minutes while I talk to some of your administrators behind the scenes. So these are some of the tips and tricks that I recommend that you can do and build within your application to support those end users. So you might need to create some new members to allow you to create create kind of a more dynamic model to do the scenario planning. So what I recommend is we may be creating some expense rates. So maybe you calculate your operating expense per your volume, your GA expense per your volume, so that you can create kind of a driver-based module. Again, it's not going to be, you know, 100% accurate, but it gives you a better framework. It's going to allow you and your users to work much quickly. So you calculate, for example, these expense rates, and maybe it's your labor per volume, it's your supplies per volume. Calculate, you add those members, and then you add a member formula or calculate in a rule. Basically calculate what that rate is based on actuals. And you can decide, you know, are you going to do it at a year total and average it out? Are you going to do it by month? You have some flexibility, but you calculate that rate based on actuals, and then you basically can push that over and then use that from a forecasting standpoint. So then as users update their volumes, you do your volumes times this rate to come up with the new forecast really, really quickly. Again, it's a higher level. It's not super, you know, not going to be as accurate as some bottoms up person that takes months to plan it. Very quickly. You're definitely going to be adding in scenarios and versions. I just don't forget, because I do this occasionally where I go quick and I'm just adding members. Make sure that you include beginning balance as a time period, because a lot of times you're going to be storing these assumptions. You may even be storing data at an annual level. And so you're going to use the beginning balance member as that mechanism to do that. We talked earlier about kind of the design and use of scenarios and versions. You guys make this your own. Again, it's going to be applicable to you, but hopefully that made sense on kind of the use of these two dimensions within our planning applications. If you are using the financials framework or model, you may need to add in some new valid intersections for the new scenarios that you add in. So just that's note for anybody using the financials framework. My other recommendation, kind of ways of working, kind of the way the Planning Cloud pre-built content works is working as kind of your main version. That's like the live version that you work on a regular basis. And we've kind of employed that design in a lot of even our custom applications. So we have forecast working, we have plan working. That's kind of the live version. Once I have a set of data based on a set of assumptions, I can then copy that into my mitigation version. So you don't have to do this, but sometimes it's helpful to just know, like, working is where I'm working. All right, I've got this plan in place. I'm going to copy it into mitigation 1. And then now I'm going to change some assumptions, make these different changes. Now I'm going to copy that into mitigation 2. So you don't have to do this, but I think sometimes this is a helpful way of working, kind of a process you can add in. You guys saw in my demos that I used rules to assign assumptions. So you can add runtime prompts and or you can use global forms. So again, what you want to do is allow folks, and again, a lot of your, whether you're using the pre-built content, whether you're using your custom applications, you likely have designed those you know, to plan by department, by entity, and all of your assumptions and all of your details down at some very granular level across all your sparse dimensions. So what I recommend you do is let's set some global assumptions that can be applied, pushed out to all entities, all products, all whatever, all, you know, your sparse dimensions, and then let users then update it based on that. So you don't have to, you know, think about what's right for you and what makes sense. I mean, there's going to be some rules for different business units that may make sense. For example, if you've got, you know, your retail stores and you've got your online presence, obviously those assumptions are going to vary by business unit. So definitely make sure it makes sense, but then take those assumptions up a notch so you can be fast, okay? Again, you can use runtime prompts in the rules to capture from users. I also like using the forms because then you can see the assumptions. Here you're looking at a form. This is kind of a using that rate mechanism where, like, we have kind of the key drivers and then we have our direct cost of goods sold. We have variable personnel expense, variable supply expense. We've got an SG&A rate per volume. So I calculated those rates based on actuals. And then I can prompt this up for the users. The users can adjust our volumes. They can adjust these rates. And then it spits out a new forecast for me by entity, by department, again, depending on whatever level you determine. So hopefully that makes sense kind of from a global assumptions perspective. Now, here's a quick snapshot, and we will send out the slides at the end of this so you can, because it's kind of hard to see. But what does one of those copy and adjust rules look like? And again, this is for your Hyperion administrators, kind of setting it up. You're going to be copying data from a source scenario to a target version. You know, you probably want to clear that out before you run it, the copy. If you're using any kind of trend-based, or you've got some kind of logic in your current application, you know, that you don't want to use for a particular scenario planning, you would want to clear out those trends, and or, you know, don't use the current logic that you have. So again, you've got global assumptions where you can kind of point to those global assumptions. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, you're going to use data copy, because what's great about that is it'll create your blocks for you. It's the fastest way to create those blocks and copy everything over. Use runtime prompts and substitution variables to make these copy rules dynamic. Applying the global assumption rules, so we just talked about this, runtime prompts or forms. One other question, and you know, for you guys, and even as I was like asked to create some of these different these demos and examples, and me thinking through what I would do in real life, is, you know, should I hard code it or should I make it dynamic? Sometimes when you write these rules, you can make it dynamic, so it's very flexible, but oftentimes that may take a little bit longer. So what I would recommend is, for now, do whatever's fastest, you know, and you can come back and kind of enhance your code, tune your code, you know, to be a little more flexible, best practice design. Right now, I would just be like, okay, I know I can write A times, you know, C equals A times B, semicolon, versus, and I just go ahead and plug that in, versus maybe doing some more elaborate kind of enhanced design. Make sure you're focusing on your forecast years and periods. If you already have a driver-based model in place, use those rules and use that logic. My other, you know, and there's a debate, you know, do you build these things in member formulas? Do you build these things in rules? This is my Tracy McMullen unofficial tip. For right now, while you're designing this, again, you need to be fast. So like for me, I am fastest if I can write, here's all of the logic in a single rule, and here's the steps in the order that takes place. If you use member formulas are great, but then you can't see the logic easily from a writer of business rules kind of all in one place. So my tip, and a lot of people will probably disagree with me, but my tip is, let's just write a rule, keep it simple, you know, and this is kind of the order, this is the calculations. I can see it in one view on how we want this to run for this particular scenario plan. And then later, if we've got time and we want to envelop this into our standard process, you may go back and maybe put it into member formulas. So that's my unofficial recommendation. And then one thing to note is that if you are using the financials framework, that framework does use member formulas. So if you're gonna say, you know what, okay, great, and you can do this, and we've done this before, you don't want to use the financial framework logic, the trends, and the drivers that it's created. I want to create kind of this simplified version of it. All you have to do is you just don't run a calc dim statement on the account, because that will execute the member formulas that are in. Otherwise, you can update member formulas. There's ways to do it. So I've got a whole set of presentation materials kind of specifically on the financials framework. If you guys have an interest and kind of want to see the details of kind of this applied in financials framework or financials module and how it works, we can set up another webcast. I can record that as a briefing to make available to you guys. Clear rules. So you may want to write a couple of clear rules that are safe for your end users. You know, if you know, you've got, you know, for example, travel and expense. We're not going to be traveling in April, May. Maybe we're traveling a little bit more in May, but there may be some rules that you just want to just globally you know, run a clear on. So you may do that. And again, this is probably like a power user, a couple of power users that are working together, but sometimes that's easier than going in and manually clearing out data. So kind of understand, work with your FP&A group to understand, okay, well, you know, clear out stock buyback plans. We're probably not going to be buying back stock. So instead of a user having to manually go in, let's just clear it out. So just know, and that takes a little bit of development time, but can save a lot of time from a user perspective. Calc everything rules. So sometimes in our normal kind of planning process, it's segregated, right? So we spend time forecasting our revenue, and then we see our expense. We really don't get to the planning cash flow piece of it until kind of the very end. We want everything solidified, and we sometimes don't worry about calculating cash flow to the end once those plans are in place. not in days of Corona. When in days of Corona, you know, users make a change to kind of our volume assumptions or revenue assumptions, I want to see what that looks like in cash immediately. So you might have to create a rule set that kind of runs everything together, or a calc everything rule. That may not exist today because you didn't need it. I can think of a couple clients where, you know, they kind of set up a more segregated process. Don't forget about direct input forms. So again, just if users need to be able to key in a really high level adjustment number, add in some assumptions behind the scenes, they have the ability to do that. Creating new forms is needed. You may, hopefully you're using user variables for your scenarios and your form definition or substitution variables, so that your forms will automatically see any new scenarios that you create. But you may also want to create new forms, right, where you can see these different kind of scenarios side by side, setting up standard forms for users. Now, you can also put this in the hands of your end users, and there are some new features. What smart forms have been around for a while, and then flex forms is a new feature that's come out. I think we're going to try and get out a play it forward video on both of these here in the next couple weeks, so you guys can see how you can use this. But it's kind of putting some of the you know, some of the planning features in the hands of users versus the administrators, so that they can tweak their forms and what is shown to them in a form, and or you know, if they've got kind of an ad hoc that they want to save to reuse. So definitely maybe the time to look at some of those features. And again, we'll have some upcoming play it forward videos to show you how to do that. You'll also probably want to create, you know, some new dashboards potentially that you didn't really have before, because kind of looking at these different scenarios, comparing it, it's going to be some new visualizations. You may even, it's really hard, it's really easy to update the navigation flows within Planning Cloud. So you might want to create some scenario planning specific cards and clusters to guide users through the process. So that was planning cloud, planning on premise. Hopefully that made sense. I know I think I probably talked really fast. We will record this, so if you need to go back and hear me again, if you have any questions, let me know. Another tool that you can use for scenario planning is strategic modeling. This is the old HSF. So if you have Hyperion Strategic Finance on-prem and you've never used it, you can use it, and it's a pretty cool tool to do scenario modeling. If you are an EBPCS legacy customer, and or you subscribe to the new enterprise, either standard or enterprise EPM cloud subscription, you have this tool available to you. Now, this one can do a lot of the same stuff that I just showed you, and it's really good. But what's good about it is it's got some of the pre-built kind of function driver-based things built into it. It's got the financial statements built into it. The main difference is it's at a usually like a macro level. And it's usually not spread out to all your different departments. You're not going to push this out, you know, to your different departments and your folks across the organization. That's what we're going to use Hyperion Planning Cloud for. This is, you know, your FP&A group. It could be M&A group, you know, so this may be the time. Maybe you're really one of the companies that are doing okay, you're cash heavy, and you're going to want to start to look and acquire companies, right? Because so you're going to want to do some modeling to see, okay, we know this particular company would be a great addition. What does that look like, you know, and what are the deal points to help it make sense for us from a return on investment standpoint? Or maybe you need to look at it from a divestiture standpoint. So if you need to sell off different business units, you know, you've expanded into areas outside of your core business, maybe now's the time in this crazy world to go ahead and, you know, maybe divest a particular area of your business, get that cash injection. So this is the tool to help you do this. So again, I think it's in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about this particular and show you guys in detail. We do have some briefings on strategic modeling posted on the website. So if you're interested there, go there. If you need help with this or want to learn more sooner versus waiting for the webcast, please reach out to me at tmcmullen@nrl.com or info@nrl.com, because we can show it to you sooner if you don't want to wait for the 2 weeks, because it's a powerful solution. So so strategic modeling. The other one is Essbase. So this is where, like, I you know, want to see if folks want to raise their hands on the call. You know, if you don't have planning, you don't have Planning Cloud, but you're a native Essbase user and you have a ton of Essbase experience, Essbase works too. So you can do a lot of the same scenario planning that I discussed today, and creating rules and users updating, you know, scenarios and drivers and assumptions. You can do that in Essbase as well. Additionally, and I'm not going to go through these detailed demos, Glenn Schwartzberg has a really good briefing posted on the NRL website that goes through this demo. There's a feature in OAC Essbase and that is available in Essbase 19C. So if you're on an older version of Essbase, you guys can upgrade to Essbase 19C. You can take advantage of it. And this feature is called scenario management. So it can actually create scenarios. You can enable it for your cube. It'll create a scenario dimension, and you can very quickly kind of add in different assumptions, calculations, and then see how those different scenarios roll up, and you can toggle back and forth. So again, I hope to have time to maybe show this to you, but I think we're right at the hour. So again, this is posted, this whole demo on using scenario management and Essbase is posted on our website, so you guys can see that there. So with that, again, the different tools really, you know, that we've got in our Hyperion EPM tool belt, planning on premise or cloud, strategic modeling, and then Essbase. So which one should you use? Well, again, I've kind of got a Visio diagram, but I would say whatever solution you own today that you can work the fastest in, that's what I recommend. So if you're on premise, you know, Hyperion Planning or Essbase, HSF. If you're in the cloud, Planning Cloud, or strategic modeling. You're going to be using Profitability and Cost Management Cloud or HPCM to help you identify the profitability component. We're going to talk about that in a few weeks. If you're using Excel, still use Excel. Like, keep doing this, because you do definitely need to be scenario modeling. But it might be time, if you want to reach out to NRL, your Oracle sales rep, to take a look at a subscription. It's something we could probably get up and running for you very quickly, you know, so that you can be taking advantage of it, because you guys need these tools now. And of course, there are some reporting solutions as well. So, you know, this is a slide Edward kind of post just to make sure, hopefully you guys are taking action, right? So you don't want to be just standing, holding your breath, watching. You need to be taking action now. And there are some tools to help you take action. So with that, I will conclude the webcast, and I will see, are there any questions? Let's see. So someone had asked about a FlexForm webinar. So I think what we're going to do, we have a Play It Forward platform. So if you go to YouTube or NRL.com, or I think it's, if you go to APM/BI, there's we have our YouTube channel, and that's where we'll post kind of the how-to on the FlexForms. Now, what I will say is I think Oracle is presenting a webcast on FlexForms and some other new feature on Monday or Tuesday of next week. So if you guys go to Customer Cloud Connect, you can see all of the upcoming webcasts that Oracle is doing, and they are doing one on FlexForms. So I would say FlexForms, we should have that one posted in the next 2 to 3 weeks. There's another question that says, can we have a solver for that, like linear programming? And I'm not sure what that means. So if you could elaborate on that question. Another question is, we've got PBCS. So how do we use scenario planning? So if you have a PBCS subscription, all the stuff that I showed you related to planning, you can do. So all the demos that I showed today, creating scenarios, creating maybe some rate-based calculations to do some quick driver-based forecasting and or trend-based, you can layer that in. You can create those dashboards. So if you have a subscription now, you can do that. The one thing you can't do yet is strategic modeling, but I didn't show that today. So with a PBS subscription, all the stuff, all the demos that I showed you guys, you should be able to do that. And again, it's likely taking, if you have an existing application, taking that application and then kind of building in some additional components to help you plan a little bit faster. If you have not implemented yet, then it's probably a matter of creating just really simple application to get up and running to help you do that. So if you would like more information and some more details on that, let me, again, my email, I'm gonna type my email here in the chat session, is tmcmullen@nrl.com. I can help you get in touch, or if you want to go to info@nrl.com. So I've posted this in the chat section for anybody who needs my email. And it should be underneath the answered section if you go to all. So please email me if you guys kind of would like some help. Again, I mentioned that we have an offering where we will do kind of an advisory call for free to help figure out what's the right game plan for you. So I encourage you guys to take advantage of that option. It doesn't hurt. And we can do that advisory call, and then based on that, give you a game plan that you can either tackle by yourself and or if you need some assistance, we're also happy to provide that as well. Any other questions? All right. I think that is it. So I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. I hope everybody is staying safe, staying sane in this crazy time. But really, you know, appreciate you guys joining in. Hopefully this is helpful. If there's other information you need or would like to see, don't hesitate to email info@nrl.com. We'll do our best to get that information out to you. Thanks so much. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.